Hi everyone, it's Andrew here. Today I'm going to show you a new gizmo that I've been working on called the AZ channel mixer, or AZ channel mixer, if you pronounce it that way. I've got a couple of different images in here. One nice thing about this gizmo is it's primarily color based, so it doesn't really matter what aspect ratio my shots are. So you can see these are all different sizes, and I will be demonstrating on these guys today. So let's just plug into color wheel for now and take a look at what's inside here. So this particular gizmo I came up with mainly for getting better tracks, getting better luminance keys, and more options for desaturation. And the idea came to me when I was thinking about how in Photoshop you have a channel mixer where you can kind of convert things into different desaturated black and white images, and you get a lot of different variety depending on which channel you choose, say red, green, blue, but also things like orange and yellow. So I wanted to see how far I could push it inside of Nuke, and so what I came up with is this guy, and I found it actually has a lot more useful features that I could technically do too. So the first thing you're going to want to do to use this is plug it into your plate. It only has one input, and then you're going to want to prepare the plate. Okay, so this is just basically a saturation node, so you can see I can crank it up, and if we view from here, and I'm going to reset this guy down here because this is a second saturation node, and just need to make sure. Aha! Oh, actually, that's happening because later on I'm going to use this guy here. Yeah. So this is a sneak preview, actually, of essentially what's going to be happening here, which is that we can actually isolate these colors on the color wheel. So there's a lot of colors in here, and we're basically isolating them. And we have 27 different combinations that you can choose from here to get those isolations. Now, in the one sense, let's say I were to go here and plug it into, say, this class photo. So why is this useful? Well, for starters, if I'm just trying to make a nice black and white portrait of everyone, not something super colorful like this, but something more like this, you can see this one, it's like, oh, their faces are all sort of brown. It doesn't look quite right. So this is probably because I also have the saturation cranked up here. So this is sort of the initial saturation. And you can choose the different methods. I tend to use maximum or Rec 709, but it's up to you. And you can also use a grade note. And I have kind of all the core essentials that you would need inside here to make little adjustments. So let's say I wanted to do a little tweak like that. And now I can kind of basically cycle through these. And you can see we got very different results if you look at everyone's skin tone, right? This is more like a red channel version. And you could basically just cycle through these until you found something that you were kind of remotely happy with. So let's say I like this one. Then I can kind of go back and tweak that original saturation adjustment. I can play with the math, which is pretty subtle once we get down to 1. I can play with that original grade note, and I can also now deal with this one. So down here you can see we've got, you can actually see what is happening here. So it's actually focusing mainly on the reds there. And as I start to desaturate, we get down to that. I still have the math option, so you can see maximum gives me a very different result than Rec 709. And then a second grade note. So now we can just tweak on top of that if we just want to sort of adjust what we already have with all the core features, as well as a sharpen. And this is mainly, again, for tracking purposes. So if I want to crank this up to, say, 7, then now I get a very sharp image. And then I've got the filters I can use inside the sort of standard sharpen tool stuff. So I've hidden that just because you may not be using it if you're just using it to make a nice black and white photo. And then lastly, if we needed this as an alpha channel to make some adjustments, notice right now if I press alpha, it actually shows me that this is now the same. And it's because it's stealing from the red channel, and technically you can choose any channel you want. I have it set by default to the red one. But if you didn't want that, you can just turn this guy off, and now we'll have whatever the original alpha was, in this case no alpha. If we were to put a shuffle, and say give me a pure white alpha, okay, so it's actually killing the alpha, so you would actually need to copy that back in. Something to make for version 2. But I figured most of the time you would actually just want to have this feature. Now, lastly, down here there's disable invert RGBA. So this is set on by default. If you want to disable it, you can actually get an invert of the image. And now technically we could go in and make some adjustments to get something here. So you might find this useful, not for, say, a portrait, but maybe for tracking or isolating, again, for mats, right? If we wanted to tweak everything except their faces, we're kind of able to isolate it that way. So that's pretty cool. Let's take a look at it now on a very colorful image. I'm going to turn the invert back on. So if we were to reset these values here, sharpen, good, is set to 0, and this one's set to the default value. So just looking at this Mad Max picture, you can see if I cycle through here, get a lot of different variations. And by increasing the saturation here and maybe going into the grade node and making some adjustments, those changes will become more pronounced. You can see we start to even see some of the compression in the image this way. So that's sort of the idea there. Now, one interesting thing is I can go to this output saturation and I can say, I don't want you to be black and white, I want you to be full color. So I set it back to 1. And since this is set to a value of 4, it's very saturated. If we were to go through here and look not in the alpha channel, but in the color channel, you can see we get a wide range of color choices. And this is essentially what's happening with our shuffle nodes. We've almost got like a rainbow there, and we're just cycling through these guys. And a few black and white options still too. So that's actually kind of revealing to you what is actually under the hood with these channel combinations. And I've kind of kept it hidden for a while, but I'm going to show you with this one here. So now I also have a colorful future city. This is from the very colorful film Speed Racer. So really, really super bright. And if you were to go down here and say, what's this list of combinations, and you click it, you'll see that we have essentially a list of 27 different things. And these are all based on the switch node options that you have here that I have embedded inside. And you're like, okay, I understand red, green, blue, so that's the same as RGB. And then I also have cyan, yellow, magenta, and I use an expression node to create these. And then these are all the combinations, different permutations of basically the shuffle node. And you can see I have a few inside jokes mixed in here. So if we were to actually go inside this Gizmo, you can see I've got something like this. So I've got at the top our saturation and our grade node, and then at the bottom our grade node, saturation, sharpen, our alpha control or invert. But then this switch node essentially is controlling all these guys in here. Okay, so if I were to click on this one, and you can see I kind of can just go all the way across. So inside here we've got very simple things, just like, hey, give me the green channel, like this. You can see I've got some expressions here as well in order to create these guys. And then it's basically, again, every single option that I could think of for this. And rather than having to go through and do this manually, I figured it'd be nice to have a tool where it's all been done once, so you never have to manually do this ever again. And that way you have more options than sort of the standard that we usually rely on, which is generally just red, green, blue, maybe the luminance channel, right? So now we have a lot more options. So if we go back to this one, we were to look here, just want to show you, so let's say we're using this for tracking or maybe isolating a color correction. Let's say I set sharpen to 1. It's already a very sharp image. But if we were to just kind of cycle through this, you can see we get some very groovy different looks for that. And particularly for a desaturated image, it's impressive to see sort of how much detail we can actually change here. So if you look at the sky in particular, we're really able to kind of change what is selected in the white and what is removed in terms of black. So you can imagine using a keyer based off of this, we'd be able to isolate a lot of different regions and give ourselves a very different look. If you even just compare that versus that, drastically different. And so we kind of saw a sneak peek of that when we were looking at the color wheel, and we saw kind of how it can go through all the different sections. which are even more exaggerated if you increase the saturation there. You can see what it's selecting. You can also see it in the color bar if you want to test it that way too. Each aspect that's being selected. So it's a pretty light tool. It's mostly color corrections, shuffles, and you can see I kind of tried to make it as efficient as possible. But I hope, yeah, you find this tool useful for creating cool images, and particularly for isolating mattes and things that you might want to key out, say the background or a character's face, or anything you need to track as well, or just making really cool black and white images. So hope you found that helpful. Feel free to email me if you have any questions. I have my email down here at the bottom. And yeah, I hope you find this Gizmo useful.